3 days after my grandmother's funeral, my uncle was already asking about the house, and I let him talk, because I had something in my coat pocket that none of them knew about. Welcome back to Thread Stories. If you are new here, this is where the stories that never get said out loud finally get told. Today's story is called My Family Stole My Grandmother's House, but I Had the Real Will. Stay with me. Because what Ruth did 3 weeks before she died is the kind of thing that changes everything. My grandmother's name was Ruth. She was sharp and funny and a little bit stubborn, and she made the best pie crust I have ever tasted, and she called me every Sunday at 2 p.m. for 15 years. Not because we scheduled it, just because that was when she called. And I always picked up. When she got sick, I started driving over twice a week. Groceries, doctor appointments, yard work, whatever she needed. Not because anyone asked, not because I expected anything in return, because she was my grandmother, and she was alone, and it felt like the most obvious thing in the world. My mother lived 40 minutes away. My uncle lived 20. My cousin lived in the same city. None of them drove over twice a week. I want to be fair about that. People are busy. People have reasons. I held on to that for a long time. But here is what I remember from the week after the funeral. My uncle was sitting in Ruth's armchair the day we came to collect her things. Her armchair. The one she had sat in every evening for 30 years with her tea and her book. He was on his phone, feet up, already talking about square footage. Already measuring the walls with his eyes. That image stayed with me. Ruth passed on a Tuesday morning in October. Peacefully, at home, the way she had always wanted. I had been there the night before. We watched an old movie she loved, and she fell asleep in her chair, and that was the last time I saw her awake. I got the call at 6 a.m. 3 days later, my mother sat me down and told me that Ruth had not left me anything in the will. The house would go to my uncle. The jewelry had already been divided between my mother and my aunt. The furniture would be sold, and the money split. She said it gently, like she was doing me a favor by telling me early. I nodded. I said okay. I did not say what I already knew. Because 3 weeks before Ruth died, on a Sunday afternoon after our regular call, she had asked me to come over. When I arrived, she was sitting at the kitchen table with a sealed envelope in front of her. My name, written on the front in her handwriting. She slid it across the table. She put her hand over mine. She said, "Keep this somewhere safe. Do not open it until after I am gone. And do not tell anyone you have it." I asked her what it was. She looked at me and said, "It is what is right." I put it in the zippered pocket of my winter coat when I got home, and I left it there. The night my mother told me I had been left nothing, I went home and I opened it. Inside was a will, dated 6 weeks before Ruth passed, signed, witnessed, notarized, every legal requirement met, and clipped to the front a handwritten letter in Ruth's own words. She wrote, "A house should go to the person who treated it like a home, not the people who waited for me to die." The house was left to me. All of it. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that. I did not call anyone that night. I did not send a photograph. I did not let myself imagine the phone calls that would follow. Instead, I called a lawyer the next morning. She was calm and practical. She confirmed what I had already suspected. The will my family had been referencing was an older, unsigned draft from 4 years prior. It had no legal standing whatsoever. The document Ruth had placed in my hands was the valid will. There was no contest. I asked her what my options were. She told me. I thanked her, made an appointment for the following week, and went back to being quiet. Meanwhile, my family moved fast. My uncle changed the locks on the house within 10 days of the funeral. My cousin posted photos of herself in Ruth's living room on social media, calling it a fresh start. My mother took the china cabinet, the one Ruth had told me stories about since I was 7 years old, and put it in her own dining room without saying a word to me. My uncle had a way of framing all of it. He used one word over and over: practical. She had a good run, he said to someone at the funeral reception. Now we have to be practical. I heard that, and I thought about the envelope in my coat pocket, and I waited. 3 weeks later, my uncle called a family meeting at the house. The purpose, as he described it, was to divide up the remaining personal items before they listed the furniture for sale. He wanted everyone present. He called it closure. I said I would be there. I also called my lawyer and told her to meet me outside at 2 p.m. When I arrived, the rest of them were already inside. Someone had made coffee. Someone had brought a notepad to track who was taking what. The furniture had been arranged in loose groups, like a showroom floor. There were boxes already stacked near the door. My uncle saw me come in and smiled. It was the kind of smile that had already decided how things were going to go. He said, "Glad you came. We want this to feel fair to everyone." I looked around the room. The lamp by the window that Ruth turned on every single evening at 5 o'clock. The kitchen table where she had pressed an envelope into my hands 3 weeks before she died. The armchair where I had found my uncle, sitting with his feet up the week after her funeral, already measuring the walls. I said, "I am glad I came too." And then my lawyer walked in behind me. The room changed. My uncle looked at her, then at me. He said, "You brought a lawyer to a family matter." I said, "No. I brought a lawyer because this stopped being a family matter the minute you changed the locks." Nobody said anything. My lawyer set her bag down. She introduced herself. She explained clearly and without any drama that the will the family had been operating under was an unexecuted draft with no legal validity. She then presented the signed, witnessed, and notarized will dated 6 weeks before Ruth's passing. She read the relevant section aloud. "The house and all its contents, to my granddaughter Emily, because she is the one who came. My cousin said it had to be a forgery. My lawyer explained the notarization process and what it means in terms of legal standing. My uncle said Ruth had not been in her right mind near the end. My lawyer explained, equally calmly, that Ruth had signed the document 6 weeks before her death with 2 independent witnesses, and that any challenge would need to be filed in probate court, where it would face the full documentation she was prepared to present. My mother had not said anything this whole time. She was looking at me. Something complicated moving across her face. Something I think had been there for longer than any of this. My uncle said this was not what Ruth would have wanted. I let that sit for a moment. Then I said, "Ruth is the one who wrote it. So I think she did." The room stayed quiet. My lawyer handed each of them a formal notice, 30 days to remove their personal belongings from the property. The furniture was not included. The china cabinet was not included. Those would be addressed in a separate conversation. My cousin looked at me with something close to fury. She said, "Grandma would be ashamed of you." I did not answer right away. I looked at the lamp by the window. I looked at the kitchen table. I looked at the walls of a house I had sat inside 100 times with a woman who had called me every Sunday at 2 p.m. for 15 years without ever being asked to. Then I looked at my cousin and I said, "No. Grandma is the reason I am here." I thanked my lawyer. I picked up my bag. I walked outside. I sat in my car for a few minutes before I drove away, not because I was shaken, more because I wanted to hold the quiet for a moment, the specific kind of quiet that follows something finally being resolved. My phone buzzed several times before I left the parking lot. I did not look at it. I moved into the house 2 months later. I kept the lamp by the window. I kept the kitchen table. I kept everything that mattered. The china cabinet came back eventually, after some difficult conversations and a few more letters from my lawyer. My relationship with my mother is complicated now. We talk, but not the way we used to. Some things, once you see them clearly, do not go back to being blurry. My uncle has not called. My cousin posts a lot less on social media these days. And every Sunday at 2 p.m, I make myself a cup of tea, and I sit in the living room of a house that a woman I loved decided to leave to someone who showed up. Not because she had to, not because I asked her to, because that is what she believed was right. If you have ever been the one who showed up, who drove over when nobody else did, who sat in the waiting room and carried the groceries and made the calls, you already understand why Ruth did what she did. Some people think inheritance is about what you get when someone dies. But sometimes, it is about finding out who they trusted while they were alive. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment below. And if you want more stories like this one, you know what to do. Thread Stories will be right here,